Everything is cancelled! No, actually everything has been cancelled, and I want to take the time that you're obviously spending on YouTube to waste it massively, to bring up out a point that a lot of people don't know, but Disney cancelled over 50 different movie projects when they merged with Fox. It became a little bit of an awkward situation when the merger happened in... oh shit, when was this? Despite being teased about for nearly over a year and a half, the merger happened in 2019. After a huge bidding war with Comcast, Fox eventually became a part of Disney on March 20th, 2019. Shortly after that, several projects were cancelled. Sorry. A lot of projects were cancelled, and I'm actually going to list all of them as well as the little bits of information that were known before their full cancellation. Now, why these movies were cancelled, we may never truly know, but I'm going to take a guess that it had to do with either financial issues or the fact that Disney really didn't see it working with their current brand. It is an awkward situation because with so many films, I had to put them into 3 different categories. Could have been cool, definitely not cool, and glad it's cancelled. I'm going to go through all these 3 different categories. The full list is actually from this Reddit thread here, so if you just want to read this and you don't actually want to hear me talk about any of these films and why they think that they'd be cool, you can just skip it completely and you can read this. I'm actually giving you out as a content creator. Everybody has like that weird comment on videos where it's like, this could have been a Reddit post, so why did you make a video about it? The information about the full list can actually be accessed here, or the link is in the description below. So with this video being based on a Reddit post, I do want to give a shout out to Turkius, who basically made this post a little over 7 months ago, and I've been wanting to do a video about this for a long time, because I think it's fascinating to look at what is and isn't cancelled, because there is a full list where there are movies, mainly adaptations, that are basically a big part of Fox's staple. This includes the Avatar series, Death on the Nile, which is a sequel to The Murder on the Orient Express, a Bob's Burgers movie, a reboot of Garfield, a reboot of the Zorro movies, simply called Z, and for some reason, a trilogy based on the Fear Street novels by R.L. Stine. Apparently the first one began shooting in March of 2019, and apparently it's meant to still come out in the summer season in the US. Now, before we actually start, I do want to introduce a drinking game that will be a big part of this list. Anytime I mention the name Sean Levy, please drink. You will have a complete and utter bout of alcohol poisoning by the end, because this guy had a lot of projects at Fox before Disney took over. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through the over 200 projects that Fox had right before the Disney merger. I'm mainly going to only be talking about stuff that was publicly announced and then publicly scrapped. There is not a lot of information for a lot of this stuff, and we don't know what the scripts or the concept or the major conceit of the films were going to be. We only have log lines and barely any information to go off. So let's judge them extremely harshly, and let's begin. Exit West. The log line for the film is a couple discover that certain doors in their war-torn city are portals to other places. This would have been directed by Morton Tildum, and while I'm not a huge fan of Morton, Exit West sounds like a very cool idea. Like, the premise in itself, it just, basically it's World War II, but thinking with portals. Chronicle 2. Now, this would have been a sequel to the 2012 found footage teen thriller. Now, as long as Max Landis isn't attached, I'm very, very on board for anything in the Chronicle universe. It was a fun world to inhabit, and it was presented very, very well, even when using found footage as a genre. It's a shame that Max Landis is a since this is the only good thing that he's ever done. Cold Comfort. Cold Comfort would have been a movie about an American civilian who works with the FBI to take down a Russian intelligence agent on American soil. Mark Webb was set to direct the film. Now, I don't like Mark Webb, but 500 Days of Summer is just a very, very good film, and Mark Heyman is a very, very good writer. His next project, Machine Man, based off the book of the same name, sounds very, very good. Crater. Now, Crater sounds pretty cool. It's about a boy who lives in a lunar colony, and then he visits a moon crater with friends before saying goodbye to moving away from said moon. It's not quite sure why that is the case, but look, this sounds too sweet and wholesome for anyone, especially Sean Levy, to possibly fuck up. John Griffin was slated to write, and he wrote one of the very good episodes of the latest Twilight Zone reboot from 2019. Figment. An imaginative boy and his family are thrown for a loop when their greatest fears come to life. Now, I'm not quite sure if this was going to be animated or live action, but Rob McElhenney apparently left this film to go make the Minecraft movie for Warner Brothers and then Mythic Quest for Apple TV. And I think the premise is very, very good, although it has like a little bit of inklings of like a PG version of Ted, depending on how it would play out. But look, with McElhenney at the helm, I trust him as a writer-director at this point, and I really hope that his next set of films and TV projects turn out very, very well. Incognito. A man rats out his bad boss and then he seeks refuge in witness protection. Fede Alvarez is a very fascinating guy, because Don't Breathe was an exploitation sleeper hit that I think will pop up on a lot of horror fans' lists in the best horror films of the 2010s, and his Evil Dead remake, while not perfect, didn't suck and delivered on a truly gory premise, especially given the aspect aspects of the original. He's currently in pre-production to remake the 80s classic Labyrinth. I don't know how that's going to pan out unless it turns up on Netflix, so I don't think he has the balls to make a very, very dark Labyrinth, but I do wish him the best, and I'm sorry that Incognito couldn't get made. Influx. Influx is a sci-fi thriller about particle physicist John Grady coming up with an astounding invention, a device that can reflect gravity. But instead of receiving worldwide acclaim, the lab is locked down by a shadowy organization called the Bureau of Technology Control, which aims to shut down technological advances from reaching the public. Now, Grady is put inside of a gulag with hundreds of the greatest minds of science. Now, this premise was based on a Prometheus Award-winning novel by Daniel Suarez. It just sounds very cool. There was nobody huge that was attached to it, but it would have been cool to see that come to the big screen. I don't know how the third act would play out, but I imagine there's going to be some sort of reverse jailbreak kind of situation. I haven't read the book, so I can't quite tell you at this point. Echo. Christopher McBride, who wrote The Conspiracy, which is a very good film from 2012, somehow hooked George Clooney into this project, and he was set to direct it with Sean Levy producing the film. It's basically about a drone specialist who works for the CIA. He begins to have a psychological breakdown after suspecting that his lover/wife is not who she appears to be, and wondering whether she has been replaced by someone. I just think it would be pretty good. Look, instead McBride has gone on to make a completely different film, and I think it's independent, and it's called The Education of Frederick Fitzel, which is due to come out this month. Oh my god, it actually might be out by the time this video goes up. Nevermore. Now, Nevermore is based on a book called Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. It's a YA novel that Drew Goddard was set to write and direct. The premise of the book is essentially a girl is slated to die on her 9th birthday, but then is saved by a mysterious person. Now, the project was picked up in 2017, and very little has happened since then, except there's been 3 Morrigan Crow books. Like, this series clearly has an audience, and look, I don't know how to read, so it could have been good. I don't know. Spring Offensive. Now, the plot for this was kept under wraps and was likely to be directed by Matt Reeves, who, it sounds like it could have been another Cloverfield film, but I actually looked into it, and the writer describes the script in itself to be a political medical drama. Spring Offensive was based on a spec script by Matthew McKinry Lacombe, who even received a grant to finish the script in 2014 from the Sloan Foundation for Screenwriting. The guy only has one other credit for a movie called ICBM, which is about an extended family who survive a nuclear attack when an ICBM goes off in Seattle. Now, to be honest, that sounds like a great premise, but with Matt Reeves, who has a lot of very good films under his belt, it could have been good. Tender as the Night. Now, this adaptation of the F. Scott Fitzgerald classic, I don't know, it would have been done by David Nichols. That's basically it. I looked into the story by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's about a married couple who are holidaying in the south of France, and the husband wants to have an affair with a 17-year-old actress, and then things go pear-shaped when a dead man turns up in the actress's bed. I'm not going to tell you any more about that, you should just read the book, but it sounds like it could have been an interesting thriller, and with David Nichols at the helm, I think it could have been very, very dark and very, very fun. The Case Against 8. Now, obviously, this is the true story of the court case to lift the California same-sex marriage ban, based on the documentary of the same name, known as The Case Against 8, that was produced by HBO Documentaries. Mariel Heller would have directed the film with 2 back-to-back award-nominated sleeper hits, Can You Forgive Me and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I'd actually suggest just watching the documentary. It's just very, very good. The Caves of Steel. This movie would have been an adaptation of the Isaac Asimov story of a future where robots are banned, and a lone New York City detective, Elijah Bailey, must travel to the outer world to track down a killer. The problem is, it obviously might have been a robot. Now, the film was originally picked up in 2011 by Fox, but it kept changing hands to the point where Henry Hobson, who directed the incredibly well-made slow burn Maggie, and Akiva Goldsmith was set to write the script. And look, while he's not a perfect screenwriter, he knows how to make a film entertaining, and I think he could have done something very well for Caves of Steel. The City That Sailed. Now, this was originally picked up in 2013, and it's about a girl who causes Manhattan to float towards London because she misses her dad, who travels a whole bunch. Will Smith was set to star, and I Am Legend and Constantine director Francis Lawrence was set to direct. Lawrence then found a lot of money and fame directing the Hunger Games movies, and Will Smith then did this. Yeah. But seriously, After Earth bombed so hard that it created a crater in the earth so deep M. Night Shyamalan went into hiding. Sean Levy continued to pick up the project with Truman Show writer Andrew Niccol set to pen the script. Look, it's just a really cute premise. It would have been fun. I think it would have just been like a James and the Giant Peach, but, you know, not horribly terrifying. The Editor. Now, Love, Simon director Greg Berlanti, I'm gonna fuck that up, has set to direct and produce this movie based on the book of the same name by Stephen Rowley. The book entails the early life of Jackie Onassis. Yes, that Jackie Onassis, as she helps a struggling writer and buys the rights for their book while she works at Doubleday. While the autobiographical novel isn't finished, Onassis pushes the writer to finish it, but they become locked up more and more as he reveals the dysfunctional family in the pages of his book. It just sounds like it could be interesting. Again, based on another book I could probably just read. The End of Eternity. Now, this would have been another Isaac Asimov novel. The Hugo-nominated story was about an organization created outside of time, and one of their technicians, Andrew Harlan, who falls in love with a woman and then hides her in a place called the Hidden Centuries. Look, I don't fully understand it. I read the Wikipedia page like like 5 times, and I don't think Fox understood it either. They already tried to make it into a Russian movie in 1987, and the poster looks so absurd that it looks like the ticket stubs came with a free tab of acid. Now look, the film didn't have anybody huge attached, and it looked to have been acquired when Fox continued their licensing deal with New Regency in 2000, so I don't know what it'll ever become of Asimov's story, but hopefully one day it gets filmed and makes sense. The Long Run. Now Drew Pearce hit it huge when he co-wrote Iron Man 3 with Shane Black, and then decided to help write Rogue Nation, and then whatever Hotel Artemis was, I don't even remember that film. And then he hit it huge again last year, writing Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw. Now, in between all of that, Pearce pitched The Long Run. Now, no one knows what The Long Run is actually about, but apparently it was going to be an action comedy. It's weird because Pearce has been associated with a lot of cancelled projects that sounded pretty good on the outset. First of all, a third Lego movie, an all-male Ghostbusters film, a third Sherlock Holmes movie, and a really, really fucking great movie that I really hope someone makes called The Wedding Sting. And it's based on a true story in 1990 when a Michigan police force pulled off an entire fake wedding to create a sting to get all of Flint, Michigan's drug dealers in one location. The Wedding Sting. How good is that? Anyway, Pearce is set to write and direct a movie called Quartermaster for Netflix that is set to be released later this year. The Other F Word. Look, I just really love Jason Segel, and The F Word was going to be an adaptation of the 2011 documentary of the same name. The original film was about men who had been in several different punk and hardcore bands, including Black Flag, Total Chaos, Blink-182, Rancid, NoFX, Rise Against, and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I just feel like he hasn't had a chance to redeem himself. He was in another TV show this year that I saw the trailer of, and I didn't really understand it either. And look, Segel's movie would have explored the world of aging punk musicians and how they deal with going from complete anarchists to fatherhood, without having their own sort of paternal trust. And I think it would have been interesting, would have been light, would have been enjoyable, but sadly it will now probably not get made. The Pink Panther. This was going to be a CGI retelling of the classic cool crime cat. David Silverman, seen here at Burning Man with a tuba, would have directed the CG version of this classic character with fellow Simpsons writer Michael Price, who had written a few good episodes back in the day, including the 500th episode, better known as the co-creator of F is for Family with Bill Burr. Look, it might have been good. I just really enjoy those classic animated shorts, and even if they did that weird sort of 2.5D CGI that was in Spider-Man and that upcoming movie Connected, could have been real good. I would have enjoyed something like that, and David Silverman's just very, very talented. Understand. Now, what sounds like a remix of Limitless, Awakenings, and Predators is actually a short story from 1991. Understand was originally written by sci-fi author Ted Chiang, who also wrote Story of Your Life, which created the basis for the film Arrival. Eric Hessera, who wrote the truly amazing script to Arrival and the amazing ending to Final Destination 5, which if you've never seen, you really should. He wrote a spec script based on the story Understand. Now, Understand is about a man who uses an experimental drug to cure his brain damage. Now, while the drug begins to improve his intellect, his motor skills, and does indeed cure the brain damage, he eventually gets too smart for the government and then has to fight another super intelligent test subject. Look, except for that ending, or what would have probably been the second act, just sounds very good. Untitled Ben Affleck McDonald's Project. This is a story that's based off a true incident where the head of security for McDonald's monopoly was stealing winning tickets and then selling them to the highest bidder. Now, Ben Affleck was set to direct the story that eventually became McMillions, which is now on HBO, and is okay, I guess. It has a lot of very interesting characters, but they really focus on too many minute details to truly let it be enjoyable and let the story play out naturally. With Ben Affleck set to direct, who had obviously done Argo and The Town by the time that this story was picked up, Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who wrote a fantastic script for Deadpool, Deadpool 2, Cruel Intentions 3, and Zombieland, they were set to write the film. That I don't think they could have really made the film serious, because the story is kind of serious because the FBI and a lot of, serious players are involved, but they would have definitely made it hilarious. I think that there's a lot of very interesting characters that are already in the HBO documentary that they could have fleshed out and would have been just larger than life. I expect something like this would have been a fantastic companion piece to say something like I, Tonya, which is set within similar years as well. I just don't see Batfleck making a really funny movie like this. Now, this was an extra one I didn't know whether or not to include, simply because it is actually coming out. Originally announced in late 2019, Scott Beck and Brian Woods were coming off the smash success of writing Academy Award nominated film A Quiet Place, and now obviously A Quiet Place Part 2 has been postponed. They were going to work on a Stephen King adaptation, specifically The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman? I've never heard about this before. Seems like a very original concept. Well, initially announced as cancelled, Disney are set to actually produce the movie with Beck and Woods to direct the film. It is actually about a short story that Stephen King wrote as a part of the Night Shift collection seen here. The story is about a man who tells a story to a psychiatrist, and the man says he's been investigating a series of child murders who all have one thing in common, that they cry the name the Boogeyman when they're left alone. And when the man's wife becomes pregnant, he becomes sure that the Boogeyman is out to get him and his son. It's actually a truly terrifying story, and just reading the Wikipedia entry gave me actual goosebumps. The fact that it's going with two writers who know their shit, who are going to direct stuff, I don't know what they're going to be like as directors. I just wanted to throw this in there as something to kind of look forward to around the Halloween releases next year. And finally, Untitled Kari Joji Fukunaga project. Look, I really like Kari Fukunaga. That's it. Like, the project might have sucked. I don't know. Hopefully Netflix keeps making stuff with him. The film would have been a contemporary war drama, but instead he chose to direct a Jane Eyre adaptation and then write it, like the script for it, and then direct a Bond movie. So I can't blame him for, not being too bummed out. And now, just not that into it. These are a series of films that really, look, they sound fine. I just don't know either the original concept enough, or I just don't care. Honestly, these are ones that okay, I guess. I understand why they could have been. I just don't care. And then there were none. This was originally going to be another Agatha Christie adaptation, but this time it was going to be directed by Sean Levy instead of Kenneth Branagh. For those who don't know, the story is about a group of strangers. They visit an island. It's isolated. They get picked off one by one. Classic, first ever slasher film ever made it into a book. Yeah, that makes sense. Essentially, the slasher film of its day. No one was attached to it, and it didn't really fit with the way that Branagh was actually doing his very successful Christie adaptation, so I can understand this getting dropped. Bolivar. No, not that Bolivar, but the dinosaur who lives next door. Probably just CG the dinosaurs, shoot the whole thing in New York City, maybe Toronto if you really want to be on the cheap. Look, this adaptation was based on the children's book and graphic novel from Sean Rubin. It's about a little girl in New York City who befriends her next door neighbor who is the last living dinosaur. And I don't mean like a living dinosaur in the same way that like living next to Woody Allen is like living next to a living dinosaur, like an actual living dinosaur. It would have been really cute, but to be honest, it's just not something I'm into. It could have been a great Netflix film. You know, the ones that they release around Christmas that you kind of have to watch because it's like the only thing you haven't watched yet and you're kind of not ready to go through your fifth watch of The Office that year. You know, those kind of movies. Boston Strong. Now, this was a script that Fox had acquired after Patriots Day was picked up, which is Boston Strong was based on a book of the same name, Boston Strong, from Casey Sherman and David Wedge. The story was about the aftermath of the Boston bombing attacks, which left obviously dozens permanently injured, and how the city kind of came together to heal itself. Daniel Espinosa was originally going to bring the story to life, but in 2015 he decided to work on the movie Life, and it appears he is going to be fine because he is currently adapting the greatest comic book villain of all time, Jared Leto. He's going to be adapting the Morbius, the Living Vampire, which is coming to screens this summer, but probably going to be pushed into August, maybe September, based on the current situation with the coronavirus. Charlie Chan. The film was set to revive an old Fox property. This is something I didn't know, that Charlie Chan was a part of 20th Century Fox and has been so for pretty much over half a century. Namely, obviously Charlie Chan, for people who don't know, he was the famous Honolulu detective of the same name. This reboot would have been about Charlie's granddaughter making a name for herself. It would have been written by great scribe Michael Dougherty, who had written a very bad X-Men script and had also created the very good Krampus, which is a Halloween/Christmas movie if you haven't seen it. He would later go on to write and direct the Godzilla films. So, in fact, he's currently set to make a sequel to his horror anthology Trick or Treat in 2021, Cochrane and Lafarge. Now this had a very interesting logline just because I think it would have been kind of funny at the very least. This is the epic story of two of the greatest minds in the world. Sacha Baron Cohen was set to bring this film to life with Ken Marino set to direct the film. This would have been his directorial debut. It's set in modern times and Cohen would play one of the two greatest minds. I don't know who the other mime would have been. The script would have been submitted by Michael Colton and John Aboud, who have a very long list of corny VH1 clip show credits, but also did some fantastic work with Children's Hospital at the show, not an actual children's hospital, and the film A Stupid and Futile Gesture, which was actually one of my favorite films of 2018. It's on Netflix, you should definitely check it out. Departures. Okay, I'm just going to read the logline for the film and then who's attached. A plane crash leaves the passengers wondering if they were drawn together for a reason. This is directed by Drew Goddard. This is just Lost. Just fuck off, Drew. Now, okay. Seriously, I do really respect Drew. I think he can come up with some fantastic concepts and amazing ways to film them and present them. I really love Bad Times at the El Royale. I absolutely adored Cabin in the Woods, but this sounds exactly like Lost. And if you don't know, Drew wrote 9 episodes of that show and was the co-executive producer for season 3. So look, hey, I'm glad he's working on other projects, but why the hell go back to this well? I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. Groom by director Paul Feig. Now this comedy, Groom, had a very secretive plot revolving a gay wedding. So there's that. That's all it is. Look, I think Trisha Alpin is a great writer. She he is one of the best writers for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I just don't trust Paul Feig as a director. He just makes very straightforward cookie-cutter comedies now and very mediocre thrillers. He's no Rian Johnson, he's no Edgar Wright, he's not doing anything visually appealing or anything original. Very sorry, Paul Feig. You are a great writer. I have no problem with you being a writer, but as a director, I just wish you did more. I really, really wish you did more. How to Talk to Girls. Sean Levy, drink again, was set to direct this film from Carlton Cuse and Hugh Jackman. Robert Downey Jr. was set to produce the film. It's based on a book of the exact same name. How to Talk to Girls was written by Alec Grevin on how to talk to girls and other advice to an older man going through a hard time. Basically, it was going to be about a boy, but with probably less character development and with a younger boy, which definitely makes it a lot creepier. Ben Collin, who did some fantastic writing for The Daily Show back in the day when Jon Stewart was around, he was set to write the screenplay, but opted to actually keep writing sitcoms, such as The Wonderfully Wacky and one that I highly suggest, Future Man. He also sold the rights to his book to MGM. The book is called Things I've Learned from Women Who Dumped Me, or Tiffle for short. Last Man. Okay, again, this is one where I'm just going to tell you the logline and the director and writer. A squad of young American soldiers stationed on a distant planet encounter an alien attack. It's going to be directed and written by David Ayer. And again, David Ayer is somebody who I do not trust whatsoever. The movie would have been about a group of young American soldiers who were stationed on a distant planet and encounter aliens. This is literally the plot to Aliens by James Cameron. Anyway, the pitch was acquired back in 2009 through New Regency, and it's just so vague. Who the fuck cares about a film like this? Magic the Gathering. This would have just been an adaptation of the popular trading card game. Now, originally this was going to be written by a Game of Thrones writer, Brian Cogman. Now, before you get ahead of yourself, Cogman was actually a great writer for the early seasons, and so yes, the card game Magic the Gathering was going to be written by him. And look, he seems to be fine. And the film was originally announced in 2014 when Fox and Hasbro joined forces, I guess. But it looks like it changed hands completely. The last we heard was at the end of last year when the Russo brothers, the guys who created Avengers Endgame and had written and directed a lot of fantastic sitcoms, specifically these over the last 2 decades, they were going to set to produce the film for Netflix. Now look, there's no real hope that I have in the project. I don't play Magic the Gathering. I know that I look like someone who does. The fact that they made Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame actually work and being very coherent films and not absolutely atrocious messes like the DCU, I have high hopes, but I have no stakes in this race. If you want to watch it, it's going to be on Netflix. Who gives a shit? Me Time. Again, this is one where I'm going to just say the logline and say who was attached. A husband assumes leadership as his wife is in bed rest and realizes his life mirrors that of a frontier woman ancestor. Written by Jay Martell and Ian Roberts and starring Jim Carrey. So, Me Time was acquired back in 2007, and for people who don't know, Jay Martell and Ian Roberts, they were writers on Key and Peele. They seem like very, very funny dudes. And the film is about a guy who's a novelist, and he's married and has a child, and then his wife gets pregnant again, and then she's bedridden, and this just sounds like Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton. Remember the movie Mr. Mom? But it has like this weird Western subplot that's like about past life. I can't, look, I'll watch anything with Jim Carrey in it. I don't care that he's a little anti-vaxxing, but like, Jesus fucking Christ, like what, why, how did this pitch get through? It's fucking insane. Alright, Steel Skim. Originally acquired by Fox in 2015, Andy Serkis was set to star, direct, and produce this adaptation of the Rumpelstiltskin story, and was going to be written by Hossein Amini. Now, if you don't know, Hossein wrote a phenomenal adaptation in 2011 called Drive with Ryan Gosling. You might have heard of it. Instead, sadly, Amini decided to write the movie The Snowman, which is also another book adaptation. And I think the less said about that book, the better, and the movie, even less so. Please watch Falling Ideas breakdown about that movie. It is hilarious and absolutely amazing. The Argonauts. In a surprise to no one, The Argonauts would have been a retelling of the story of Jason and the Argonauts. It was going to be written by Zack Penn. Now, the pitch was originally acquired back in 2008 when everybody was doing those really weird, gritty reboots and Sword and Sandals films. It was originally going to look at the Argonaut story and about how the soldiers were stealing back the Golden Fleece for the people of Greece. Which, look, I'm just very glad that that rhymes. And I hate Sword and Sandals films a lot. I still think the best Sword and Sandal film of all time is The Life of Brian, so that says enough about me. That being said, look, I think Penn would have been wasted on a script like this. Since 2008, Penn has penned the script for The Avengers, Ready Player One, and one of the most anticipated films of 2020, Free Guy, with Ryan Reynolds, Taika Waititi, and directed by Sean Levy, son of a bitch! The Heat 2. Now, this would have just been a sequel to the 2013 buddy cop comedy of the same name. And again, look, I like the original movie a whole bunch. I think Katie Dippold is a very, very good writer. She wrote for Parks and Rec. She wrote the original film. It has some very, very funny moments, and the chemistry between Sandy B and Melissa McCarthy was just really, really good. I highly suggest people watch that. The two very unlikable characters that eventually grow to be so funny and so wonderful. I just don't trust Paul Feig, okay? If they had an original premise or a reason for McCarthy and Bullock to team up again, totally fine. Totally be on board. But hey, what can you do? It's been cancelled. The Sweetest Fig. Oh, The Sweetest Fig. And again, fig with a fig. Oh, I'm on board now. No, again, the premise doesn't sound too bad, but it also sounds like a bad Adam Sandler comedy from that Funny People extended universe. The story is based on the children's book of the same name, The Sweetest Fig, by Chris Van Allsburg, about a cruel man who is a dentist, and he works in Paris, and he lives alone with his dog, until one day he comes across a delicious fig that holds the power to make dreams come true, and he plots to be the wealthiest man in all of France. And look, these pictures were fine back in the 80s, or the 90s when you had like a whole bunch of money and no one gave a shit, but this story was from 2018, and look, I'm glad it's cancelled, to be honest. The Pool. Now, this was going to be directed by Josh Gordon and Will Speck, who had made some films back in the day that I thought were pretty funny, like Blaze of Glory, but more importantly, it was going to be written by Dan Lagana, Josh Gordon, and Will Peck. I really thought Dan Lagana was, like, amazing. I think The American Vandal might be one of the greatest sitcoms I've ever seen, and Zack Stone is going to be famous. Again, two of the funniest and freshest things to come out of the last 5 years, so I'll follow Dan Lagana wherever he leads. Unfortunately, this project was actually picked up nearly a decade ago, back in 2011, and it appears to be the brainchild of the creators of The Switch and Office Christmas Party, more so than Dan. And, look, the premise is fine. The general premise of the movie was about an unemployed stoner college grad who finds work as a swim coach at a high-class country club with all these, like, beautiful older women. Look, it could have been Caddyshack, but with a pool instead of a green, but it just sounds more like a straight-to-DVD boner comedy from, like, the early 2000s. You know, like these ones that were, like, they were, like, either spin-offs of the American Pie series or just had, like, a woman without a bra on the cover, or with, like, two guys peering through women's legs. You know those types of films. Toymageddon. Now, look, apparently Toymageddon was gonna eventually be a reboot of Small Soldiers, but it was remixed with a really high-concept idea from Tariq Mahab. He just came off the indie film Sound of Silence with Ben Neighbors, and this was pitched, like, way back in 2014. Now, Justin Lin was actually set to produce the movie, but it appears that the project just has no major updates, and apparently it was going to be a 4-quadrant family comedy. The film apparently was going to be like a Ghostbusters or Jurassic Park, and then was going to be combined with the Small Soldiers reboot. It just sounds very confusing, like a real mess with no real answer. Given the timeline, the fact that it was 2014, I think it would have just been like a vehicle to put a whole bunch of toys that they didn't want to make a standalone film with, but then they were going to use Small Soldiers as a way to, like, shoehorn that in. Anyway, it sounds like not like a great idea. I do trust Justin Lin, though. Justin Lin is an amazing director. And finally, Untitled Matt Reeves Project. Apparently this was based on a pitch from Matt Sharman, who wrote Bridge of Spies, and Tobey Maguire was on board to produce the movie back in 2014. And Matt Reeves signed on to direct, and very little is actually known about the production, so whatever. Reeves went on to direct 2 of the Planet of the Apes movies. Sharman EP'd on Operation Finale last year, so it's quite good, and he's currently working on a TV series about the great film series The French Connection, but from the perspective of the French, which I probably won't watch, so I have no horse in this race. So that was everything else. I'm gonna very quickly go through the waste of times to not waste your time. And last and definitely least, these are all films that I guaranteed would have been a complete and utter waste of time if they were actually going to be made. Starting at the top with 40 Thieves. So, Jason Rothwell was going to team up with Sean Levy. Again, okay, fuck. Alright, this would have been an adaptation of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, but it would have been an adventure movie with comedic undertones. Look, this story was announced after a bunch of gritty reboots of fantasy films, or fantasy stories like Alice in Wonderland, Maleficent, Snow White and the Huntsman. They're all huge box office hits, so just that, I guess, but it'll be Alibaba and the 40 Thieves with hopefully a much more ethnically diverse cast, instead of just pale white women trouncing around on a green screen. So yeah, kind of glad that one got cancelled. Assassin's Creed 2. Look, the first one made a bunch of money, and the second one would have explored the Animus project. Look, I don't know. I really hate the Assassin's Creed games, and the movie never sounded appealing to me at all, except for the fact that Michael Fassbender is a fantastic actor who gets wasted on terrible films. Corey May, who wrote the original games, was attached to write the screenplay, which, I mean, that's a positive if you're a fan. Look, Assassin's Creed 2 has the exact same problem a lot of other sort of big adaptations had at the exact same time it was announced. They planned a trilogy in advance, and then they announced a sequel even before the first one was shown in theaters to, like, drum up some kind of box office goal to show it's not a soulless cash grab, even though it's a soulless cash grab. Look, the first one made $240 million on a $125 million budget, so what the fuck do I know? Commando. Now, look, fine, remake Commando, I don't care, but how are you gonna outdo Arnie? This was like one of the best performances he ever did, and it's so, like, straight-faced, and Commando is one of the most ridiculous films of the 80s that still somehow, like, it still holds up. You think you can do better, David Ayer? Yeah, David Ayer was gonna direct a Commando remake, and who would you cast? Who could you possibly, there's nobody possibly at the exact same level except maybe The Rock, and he's already doing other better, funnier things that Schwarzenegger paved the way for in the 80s.
You're a funny guy, Sully. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.
Anyway, I'm glad it's cancelled. Flash Gordon. This is going to be written and possibly directed by Taika Waititi, and just straight up pass. Look, Taika basically turning Thor into Flash Gordon is one of the best things the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever did, and he would have been wasted on a project like this. Flat Stanley. So apparently this was the thing in Canada and the US in the mid-90s, and it was like created by like some teacher in Ontario, and look, this is so weird. As an Australian, I don't understand this. Like, we had like the weird S thing, and I think that that's also a global phenomenon as well, but like, it'd be like making a horror film based on that. So apparently the script for Flat Stanley would have been just his worldly travels. So what you would do with Flat Stanley is you would like send a paper dude to your families in other cities, and then they would write on it and bring it back. I don't know, man. Canada's weird. Hitman 2. Look, all video game adaptations and sequels, except for Phoenix Wright, Detective Pikachu, and Silent Hill, just straight up suck. And look, this would have sucked as well. It was going to be a sequel to a film that already sucked, and Daniel Casey was attached to write the film, but instead he wrote the script for Fast and the Furious 9, which I think is a better use of your time, to be honest. McClane. Now, this would have been an origin story for John McClane, the hero cop of Die Hard. So it's a prequel to Die Hard. Well, shit, that sounds so good. Like a total 80s action badass. Restart the franchise, set it in the late 70s, early 80s, see McClane's roots, and like, who have you got working on that? Oh, just the guy who created the Underworld series, and then he made like Live Free and Die Hard, or Die Hard 4.0, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, and he like tried to reboot Total Recall. Oh, okay, cool. Who's writing it? Oh, they're the two brothers who wrote the Conjuring movies, and they were in a Double Mint commercial when they were kids. Okay, cool. I guess, yeah, make that... It's so weird that it's been over 25 years since there's been a good Die Hard film. Do you guys ever think about that? The fact that there are, like, so many franchises that are still being prolonged that started in the 80s and 90s, and there literally hasn't been a good version of it since, like the 90s? Like, since the 90s or early 2000s? Like, think about Terminator. There technically hasn't been a very good Terminator film since the early 90s. It's insane. Mega Man. Now, obviously, this would have been about the video game Mega Man, and I really like Mega Man. The problem is that his story is almost the exact same story as Astro Boy, which they fucked up already. Anyway, the film was announced in 2018 with Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman to write and direct. As someone who doesn't really trust the team behind Paranormal Activity 3 and 4, and then wasted the premise of the movie Nerve, look, they can make Mega Man if they want, but I just don't think that that'd actually be a good fit. Pied Piper. Now, look, this would have been about a fugitive toy maker on the run from an evil bounty hunter, and it was picked up in 2011 with John Davis set to produce, and Max Landis was going to write it. And look, the less said about Max Landis, I think, the better, and the same thing can be said about this project. Play-doh, a live-action adaptation of the infamous Clay. Play-doh? Play-doh, with Paul Feig directing. Yes, the man looks about as soft as the toy of the same name, but Jesus. Jason McAuliffe was going to write the film, and he wrote a few episodes of the swiftly cancelled Heather's TV show, and that really weird movie Butter from 2011, if anybody saw that. Anyway, he would have written about the Play-doh, I guess. Jesus Christ. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Now, this would have been a reboot of the movie, of the comic book adaptation that killed Sean Connery's career. So why would you adapt it again? It's poison. You don't have to do this. Jason Rothwell makes another appearance. He adapted the fairly meh Polar last year with Michael Madsen. Oh, Mads Mikkelsen? Yeah, Mads Mikkelsen. He was set to write the screenplay, but it appears that he was the only person attached to the film from a script perspective. Luckily, he's currently working on a script about the Challenger disaster, so good for him. The return of the killer clowns from outer space in 3D. I get, you've got to go back to the well if you're famous for one thing. And Stephen Chiodo, he's a puppet wrangler, he's a strong puppeteer, he did some fantastic work on Good Burger and Team America World Police, and while I'm not a fan of the killer clowns or the fact that they're from outer space or the series in general, the weirdest thing here is that it's in 3D. Like, it's not 2009 anymore. You can just make a movie and then just drop it on Netflix. I don't get it. I hope he finds other puppet work to do, to be honest. The Sims. No. Why? Don't do this. They literally speak gibberish. Are you gonna translate Simlish for like 90 minutes? The only celebrity willing to record gibberish words for The Sims was Katy Perry and the Black Eyed Peas, and their lyrics are pretty much gibberish already.
Yarby Denzel table dupes, Ebe Duka Mimi shoops, Hippie keeps the upper goop. Yarby Denzel table dupes, Ebe Duka Mimi shoops, Hippie keeps the upper goop.
So we all know this wouldn't have worked. Like, the film was picked up in 2007, and it basically has just stayed on the shelf since then. I feel like there should just be a moratorium for like scripts that have been up there for like a decade. Like, according to the Sims Wikia, which is a thing I didn't know existed, there was a script that was written by Brian Lynch, and the more I looked into Lynch, the more I liked him and then instantly disliked him. He made Puss in Boots. He wrote the script for that, for DreamWorks, which is actually a very, very fun film, which I all highly suggest that you all watch. And then I found out that he wrote both of the Secret Life of Pets films, and then the Minions movie, and then I instantly just decided, hey, you know what? If you were going to make a Sims movie, and you already have a bunch of films where your characters speak gibberish, you might be the actual perfect guy to write it. The Three Misfortunes of Geppetto. Now, okay, I don't think this would have been a good movie, but hear me out, okay? So this is going to be a prequel to Pinocchio, where Geppetto has to go through a bunch of hardships to find his true love. And again, Sean Levy was going to co-direct this film, and he was going to co-direct it with Seth Gordon. Now, I really love Seth Gordon's original documentary, King of Kong. If you haven't seen it, it's really great. He did some amazing work on a bunch of TV shows over the past decade. But I have to say, it's pretty much downhill from there. But to make a prequel about Pinocchio and then focus on Geppetto seems stupid, if not ridiculous. Like, who is this film even for? Like, hardcore Pinocchio fans? Are you Stephen Chiodo? Is that who you are? I will say, the only positive here is that the writer, Mick Vukotovich, like, he would have been like a complete waste on this project. He wrote The Runaways. He's currently a staff writer on Kidding. The weird thing is that it was based on a spec script that Vukotovich had got picked up from The Blacklist. People who don't know, The Blacklist is a very prestigious list of writers that have highly sought after but unproduced scripts. Three Misfortunes made the 2011 list and then was picked up by Fox about 3 years later for apparently 6 figures. A reviewer from Script Shadow described the spec script as the most spec sale-friendly script he's ever read. He points out that there are obviously flaws of Hollywood's recyclable culture and how hot new screenwriters were pitching dark versions of fairy tales. We already touched on this. They eventually rated the script as worth a read, that it was very likable. They made the protagonist, they made Geppetto very, very likable, and apparently it had an unexpected sweet through line and maybe a few structure problems. And now that I've read all that out, I kind of sad it didn't get made. Maybe it would have been okay. I don't know who the film was for, but whatever. Second last, Untitled Sandlot prequel by David Mickey Evans. He was the original director for The Sandlot, and he would have been writing the project. Look, I don't get The Sandlot. I watched it a bunch as a kid, and my cousins loved it, and I just didn't really get it. And it's fine. It's a wholesome bit of Americana that worked in 1993. Since then, there have been 2 direct-to-video sequels, and the creator of the original Sandlot went on to make Ace Ventura: Pet Detective Jr. So all I'm saying is just let things rest. At least go make Ed 2 before you go back to that well, man. You're wasting your talents now. Untitled Project. That's all there is. It would have been directed by Jeff Tosmick and written by Katie Dippold. But here's the plot. Let me see if it sounds familiar to you. A group of infants hatch a Great Escape type plan to break free from their daycare center. So it's that episode of The Simpsons where Marge does Streetcar Named Desire and Maggie has to break out of a daycare. Cool. You're both like, why would you pitch that? It worked fine in a 10-minute context of a great TV show over 2 decades ago. Anyway, Hollywood is dead, and so am I, and I just want you to know that, look, as much of a monopoly as Disney is, and maybe some of these projects would have been fantastic, we may never ever truly know. But I gotta say, for the majority of the stuff, I'm glad it got cancelled. There was a lot of talent here that would have been wasted on projects that simply would not have been worth anybody else's time. It would have been a waste of the cast and the crew and so many of the writers, and look, it's sad when projects die. It really is. When things get cancelled and you don't know where your next paycheck's gonna come from or what you're gonna do next. But I can very, very boldly say that I don't care about Play-doh the movie doesn't get made. I don't care that The Sims the movie doesn't get made. I don't care that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen doesn't get made. Sometimes things get cancelled for a reason, and it's a good reason. Now, if you want to make sure that this YouTube channel keeps going and doesn't get cancelled, please support me on Patreon. I'm very, very broke, and right now is not a great time. I've had to fix a lot of things in my PC over the last 2 weeks while I was working on this, and I have been kind of trying my best to keep it running at this point, and it's kind of worrying because it makes weird noises that I don't remember hearing from it before. But I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/helpharrison. But if you just enjoyed the video, thank you so much for watching. That's basically it. That's all done. Okay.